as we were talking about earlier, Seinfeld was this show about nothing in a time about nothing, right here, right now, end of history, it's the 90s. New York Times puts out a fairly interesting piece. Jerry Seinfeld can no longer be about nothing. The comedian, long beloved for his apolitical riffs, has been wrestling with what it means to be Jewish amid the Israel-Hamas war. Not everyone is pleased. No, that is true. Jerry Seinfeld became a mic-cradling, cereal-eating, did-you-ever-noticing avatar of American Jewish life with a brazenly shrugging persona, a merry indifference to weighty material as a comedian, and in his mega-hit TV show about nothing, as petty and apolitical as he seemed to be. Now, off-camera at least, Mr. Seinfeld appears to have reached his post-nothing period. Since the attacks of October 7th in Israel, and through their bloody and volatile aftermath in Gaza, Mr. Seinfeld, 70, has emerged as a strikingly public voice against anti-Semitism and in support of Jews in Israel and the United States, edging warily toward a more forward-facing advocacy role than he ever seemed to seek across his decades of fame. He has shared reflections about life on a kibbutz in his teens, and in December traveled to Tel Aviv to meet with hostages' families, soberly recounting afterward the missile attack that greeted him during the trip. He has participated to a point in the kind of celebrity activism with which few associate him, letter-signing campaigns, earnest messages on social media, answering simply recently when asked about the motivation for his visit to Israel, "I'm Jewish." See, this is the kind of just like cavalier marriage of Zionism and Judaism that we speak out against all the time. Like, it should not be that simple. That's an incredibly lazy and, in this case, irresponsible thing to say. Because look at how weighted that is. Look at how loaded that is. Say, well, I'm Jewish. That's why I visited Israel. That assumes that all Jews have some moral duty to support Israel.
Of course, and that's been the assumption for 75 years
Right.
until relatively recently that you could even begin to question that formulation. I think also when you look at somebody like Seinfeld, he's a smart guy, and to be a comedian, you have to have a certain perspective, even a clean, what's the deal with serial comedian? You still have to have a certain perspective. But it's very easy, I think, for people who were inculcated with that Zionism from childhood to lose that perspective in that area, especially when you're a billionaire comedian who probably doesn't have a lot of people in their lives who are going to say, well, Jerry, do you know this? Do you know that about the situation? Like, who does he have who's going to challenge him that way?
As some American cities and college campuses simmer with conflict over the Middle East crisis and Israel's military response, Mr. Seinfeld has faced a measure of public scorn that he has rarely courted as a breakfast-obsessed comedian, intensified by the more vocal advocacy of his wife, Jessica, a cookbook author. This week, as the couple and their children appeared together at the premiere of Mr. Seinfeld's new movie, Unfrosted, about Pop-Tarts, Miss Seinfeld attracted attention for another reason. She promoted on Instagram and said she had helped bankroll a counter-protest at the University of California, Los Angeles, long for UCLA, where clashes with pro-Palestinian demonstrators have turned violent. That's New York Times speak for the Zionists who she funded attacked the pro-Palestine encampment. We all saw those videos multiple times on this show, and I'm sure you guys have seen it elsewhere. Among some activists on that side of the divide, disdain for the Seinfelds had been building for months. Genocide supporter, protesters shouted at Mr. Seinfeld on Manhattan's Upper East Side in February as he left a State of World Jewry address given by Barry Weiss, a former New York Times opinion editor and writer whose media company, The Free Press, has been championed by Miss Seinfeld. And we have the tweet here and the video of this incident that they describe. So, there you have it. The man about nothing, no more.
That's why I always say all the money's on the other side. Anybody who says this is the grift, you want to get in on that Mrs. Seinfeld money?
Yeah.
You want to be on that side. You want to be on the Zionist side. If we start propagandizing for them and start writing some letters for money,
Oh yeah.
these people got money, man.
Of course. Of course.
$50,000 check. That's lunch money for them.
Of course. Of course. And, look, Jerry has always been a very relatively apolitical guy, and I'm sure he considers his support for Israel relatively apolitical as well. He just assumes it's a default. Well, I'm Jewish, so it's my duty, right? That's how a lot of these people in our community think about this. And it's very, very difficult to break that coding. Russell was talking about a friend of his who he was able to break out of that spell. He talked about that on yesterday's show. For a lot of people, it's not even a conscious thing. It's just something that they assume. Right.
That took months. And hey, I will pass on the advice that person gave to me for anyone in similar straits trying to spread the news that to be Jewish is not to be Zionist by definition. What really reached this person was Tantora. I had shared articles. I had shared the Abby Martin video, which is going to come up in the next segment. Gaza Fights for Freedom, her documentary from 2019 about this subject. Tantora was the breakthrough. That was what got through that person. So, word to the wise. I don't know. Drop Tantora on them. That was what they said. Start with that. That's what they said to me. You should have led with that.
Please clap.